The emergency alarm pierced through Ramstein Air Base at 0347 hours. Fighter jets screamed across the Nevada desert as a crisis unfolded that would test every pilot's limits. But when the squadron commander's voice crackled through the radio, requesting Bradford as emergency flight leader, nobody expected the woman holding a mop in Hangar 7 to drop her cleaning supplies and sprint toward the flight line. This is the story of Ashley Bradford and how she went from being invisible to indispensable in less than 24 hours. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The pre-dawn darkness clung to Ramstein Air Base like a heavy blanket as Ashley Bradford pushed her industrial cleaning cart across the polished concrete floor of Hangar 7. Her footsteps echoed in the cavernous space, the only sound competing with the distant hum of generators and the occasional roar of aircraft engines warming up on the flight line. At 28, Ashley had perfected the art of invisibility, moving through the military installation like a ghost, noticed only when something needed cleaning. She wore the standard-issue gray jumpsuit of base maintenance staff, her auburn hair pulled back in a practical ponytail beneath a worn baseball cap. The fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows across her face as she methodically worked her way around the perimeter of the massive hangar, where 4 F-22 Raptors sat like sleeping predators. Each aircraft represented millions of dollars of cutting-edge technology, their angular stealth designs seeming almost alien in the artificial light. "Morning, beautiful birds," Ashley whispered to the jets, a ritual she'd maintained for the past 3 years. She knew every rivet, every panel, every system on these machines better than most of the pilots who flew them. But that knowledge was her secret, hidden beneath the mundane exterior of a woman whose job was to keep the floors spotless and the trash bins empty. The first wave of personnel began filtering into the hangar around 0500 hours. Flight crews, maintenance technicians, and support staff moved with the practiced efficiency of military routine. Ashley became even more invisible as the space filled with activity, her presence acknowledged only when someone needed to step around her cart or when an officer barked, "Watch it," as she mopped near their path. Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Harrison strode through the hangar entrance with the confidence of a man who owned everything he surveyed. At 45, he commanded the 27th Fighter Squadron with an iron fist and an ego to match. His perfectly pressed flight suit bore the wings and decorations of someone who had never forgotten his own importance. Behind him walked Captain Jennifer Walsh, his deputy and the squadron's token female pilot, a woman who had fought so hard for her place that she'd forgotten how to extend a hand to anyone climbing behind her. "Thompson," Harrison's voice boomed across the hangar, directed at Master Sergeant David Thompson, the head of maintenance. "I want these birds ready for the joint exercise with the Navy boys. I don't care if your people have to work through the night, no excuses." Thompson, a weathered veteran with 22 years of service, nodded curtly. "Yes, sir. We'll have them mission ready by 0800. As the conversation continued, Ashley continued her work around them, pushing her cart closer to where the officers stood. She'd learned that people in power rarely noticed the help, which gave her an unusual advantage. She heard everything. "The Navy thinks their Super Hornets can outmaneuver our Raptors," Captain Walsh said with a smirk. "I'd love to see their faces when we show them what real stealth capability looks like." Harrison chuckled. "The F-22 systems are so advanced, these Navy pilots won't even know what hit them. Speaking of which, where's Lieutenant Morrison? He was supposed to brief me on the new targeting protocols." "Probably still trying to figure out the heads-up display configurations," Walsh replied dismissively. "Half these young pilots can barely handle the basic systems, let alone the advanced tactical packages." Ashley's hand tightened slightly on her mop handle. She knew those targeting protocols by heart, had studied them during countless quiet nights when her curiosity got the better of her. The F-22's AN/APG-77 radar system, the integrated electronic warfare capabilities, the sensor fusion technology that made these jets the most advanced air superiority fighters in the world. But she was just the cleaning lady, invisible and irrelevant to their world of aerial combat. The morning progressed with typical military precision. Pilots arrived for their briefings, their flight suits crisp and their attitudes matching. There was Lieutenant Jake Hartwell, fresh from the academy and eager to prove himself, though his understanding of complex flight systems remained frustratingly shallow. Captain Tony Ritchie, a veteran with 12 years of experience, but a tendency to rely on outdated tactics. And Major Sarah Kim, brilliant but struggling with the F-22's advanced networking capabilities. As Ashley worked, she observed the subtle dynamics playing out around her. The way junior officers deferred to Harrison's every word, even when his tactical knowledge seemed questionable. How Captain Walsh dismissed suggestions from enlisted personnel, despite their years of hands-on experience. The general assumption that rank equated to competence, and that competence could only exist within the narrow confines of the officer corps. Bradford. Sergeant First Class Miguel Rodriguez's voice cut through Ashley's observations. He was the night shift supervisor, a decent man who treated her with more respect than most. Need you to focus on the north section today. Admiral Peterson's visiting this afternoon, and everything needs to be spotless. Copy that, Sergeant, Ashley replied, steering her cart toward the designated area. As she worked, she couldn't help but notice the maintenance crew struggling with a diagnostic issue on Raptor 471. The aircraft's avionics were displaying error codes that had the technicians scratching their heads. Staff Sergeant Kelly Murphy, a capable technician with 8 years of experience, stared at the diagnostic screen with frustration. I've run the standard protocols 3 times. The system keeps flagging the inertial navigation unit, but all the hardware checks out fine. His partner, Airman First Class Brian Chun, shrugged helplessly. Maybe we need to call in the contractor specialists. This is beyond our scope. Ashley paused in her mopping, fighting the urge to speak up. She'd seen this exact error pattern before, had read about it in technical manuals she wasn't supposed to have access to. The problem wasn't hardware, it was a software calibration issue caused by electromagnetic interference from the hangar's new ELI lighting system. A simple recalibration of the ring laser gyroscope would solve it in minutes, but she was invisible. Her knowledge didn't matter because her rank didn't exist in their world. So she continued cleaning, listening as the technicians decided to ground the aircraft pending specialist evaluation, a decision that would cost thousands of dollars and potentially impact the afternoon's training exercise. The morning briefing took place in the adjacent conference room, but Ashley could hear every word through the thin walls as she cleaned the adjoining corridor. Lieutenant Colonel Harrison's voice dominated the discussion, outlining flight patterns and engagement scenarios with the confidence of a man who believed his own press releases. The key to modern air combat is maintaining situational awareness while maximizing our stealth advantage, Harrison declared. These Navy pilots are used to fighting with their radars blazing. We'll use passive sensors and data link coordination to remain invisible until it's too late for them to respond. Ashley frowned as she listened. The tactical approach Harrison described would work against conventional aircraft, but the Navy's EA-18G Growlers carried advanced electronic warfare suites, specifically designed to counter stealth technology. His plan didn't account for that threat, or for the newer passive detection methods that could track stealth aircraft through other electromagnetic signatures. Inside the briefing room, Major Kim raised a tentative hand. Sir, what about their electronic warfare capabilities? The Growlers might be able to. Major, Harrison interrupted with barely concealed irritation. I've been flying combat missions since before you learned to drive. Trust me when I say that no electronic warfare system can defeat our stealth technology when properly employed." Captain Walsh nodded approvingly. The Major's concerns are understandable, but theoretical threats shouldn't override proven tactical doctrine. Ashley shook her head as she continued cleaning. The dismissal of legitimate tactical concerns, the reliance on outdated assumptions, the failure to adapt to evolving threats, it was a recipe for disaster. But her opinion carried no weight in this world of uniforms and rank insignia. As the briefing concluded and pilots dispersed to their individual aircraft, Ashley found herself alone with the jets once again. She approached Raptor 471, still grounded with its mysterious diagnostic error. Her cleaning cart provided perfect cover as she casually moved closer to the maintenance access panel. A quick glance confirmed her suspicions. The error codes displayed on the screen matched exactly what she'd expected: a classic signature of ring laser gyroscope drift caused by electromagnetic interference. The solution was elegant in its simplicity, requiring nothing more than a software recalibration that any qualified technician could perform. But she wasn't qualified in their eyes. She was just Ashley Bradford, the invisible woman who cleaned their floors and emptied their trash. Her 3 years of studying these aircraft, her encyclopedic knowledge of their systems, her understanding of tactics and technology, none of it mattered because she wore the wrong uniform and held the wrong job title. The irony wasn't lost on her. In a few hours, millions of dollars worth of advanced fighter aircraft would take to the skies, piloted by officers who understood perhaps 60% of their capabilities, while the person who knew these jets better than anyone else continued pushing a mop across the hangar floor. As the morning shift change approached, Ashley reflected on the strange path that had brought her here. 3 years ago, she'd been a different person with different dreams. But life had a way of redirecting even the most carefully laid plans, leaving her invisible in a world where visibility meant everything. The first rays of sunlight began filtering through the hangar's high windows, casting long shadows across the polished concrete. Soon, the day shift would arrive, bringing fresh faces and familiar routines. The jets would eventually take off for their training exercise, carrying pilots who remained blissfully unaware of both their aircraft's true capabilities and the woman who understood them better than anyone else. Ashley Bradford continued her work, invisible but observant, preparing for a day that would change everything. Though she didn't know it yet, preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time. So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The day shift brought fresh chaos to Hangar 7 as Admiral Rebecca Peterson's inspection team arrived 3 hours ahead of schedule. Ashley watched from her position near the tool lockers as Lieutenant Colonel Harrison scrambled to reorganize the morning's activities, his usual composed demeanor cracking under the unexpected pressure. "I don't care what the schedule says," Harrison barked into his radio. "I want every aircraft spotless and every pilot in dress blues in 30 minutes. The Admiral cannot see us looking unprepared." The sudden schedule change created a perfect storm of confusion. Maintenance crews rushed to complete pre-flight checks while trying to make everything inspection ready. Pilots who had been casual in flight suits now sprinted to change into formal uniforms. In the midst of this organized chaos, Ashley became even more invisible, just another obstacle to navigate around. Captain Walsh emerged from the squadron office, her own stress evident despite her attempts to maintain composure. "Lieutenant Hartwell, where's your pre-flight checklist for Raptor 458? The young lieutenant fumbled through his tablet, clearly flustered. "Ma'am, I was just finishing the fuel systems check when. Just get it done." Walsh snapped, then turned toward the maintenance bay. "Thompson, is that diagnostic issue resolved on 471? Master Sergeant Thompson's weathered face showed frustration. "Negative, ma'am. My people are still troubleshooting. We might need to ground her for the inspection." Ashley's grip tightened on her cleaning cloth as she listened. The solution was so simple, so obvious, yet pride and protocol kept them from seeing it. She'd been watching the maintenance crew struggle for hours with something that could be fixed. In minutes, Admiral Peterson's convoy arrived with military precision, 3 black SUVs escorted by security personnel. Through the hangar's main entrance walked a woman who commanded immediate respect without saying a word. At 53, Admiral Peterson had earned her 4th star through sheer competence and an inability to tolerate incompetence in others. Her gray hair was pulled back in a perfect bun, and her uniform displayed ribbons representing 30 years of distinguished service. "Admiral on deck." Harrison's voice boomed across the hangar. Every uniformed person snapped to attention while Ashley, unnoticed as always, continued her work near the aircraft. At ease, Peterson's voice carried easily across the space. "Colonel Harrison, I'm here to evaluate your squadron's readiness for the Pacific deployment. I trust you're prepared to demonstrate your capabilities?" "Absolutely, Admiral," Harrison replied with practiced confidence. "My pilots are the finest in the Air Force, and our aircraft are maintained to the highest standards." Peterson's sharp eyes swept across the hangar, taking in every detail. Her gaze lingered on Raptor 471, where maintenance panels remained open, and diagnostic equipment cluttered the area around the aircraft. "That fighter appears to be having issues." Harrison's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Minor diagnostic anomaly, Admiral. Nothing that impacts our operational readiness. Minor?" Peterson stepped closer to the aircraft, her inspection team flanking her. "Sergeant Thompson, what exactly is the problem?" Thompson straightened under the Admiral's direct attention. "Ma'am, we're experiencing intermittent errors in the inertial navigation system. The hardware checks out, but the software keeps flagging calibration issues." "How long has this been ongoing?" "Since yesterday morning, ma'am. We've run every standard protocol, but 24 hours?" Peterson's tone sharpened. "And you haven't identified the cause?" Ashley felt a knot forming in her stomach as she watched the exchange. The tension in the hangar was palpable as the Admiral's displeasure became evident. She knew exactly what was causing the problem, knew exactly how to fix it, but her position made speaking up impossible. Dr. Elena Vasquez, Peterson's chief technical advisor, approached the aircraft with her tablet already open. A former Air Force pilot turned systems engineer, she had a reputation for identifying problems that others missed. "Admiral, may I examine the diagnostic data?" "Please do," Peterson replied curtly. As Dr. Vasquez reviewed the error logs, Ashley continued cleaning nearby, fighting every instinct that told her to speak up. She'd memorized technical manuals that Dr. Vasquez had probably written, understood systems integration better than most of the pilots who flew these jets, but none of that mattered because of the uniform she wore. "Interesting," Dr. Vasquez murmured, scrolling through data. "The error pattern suggests electromagnetic interference affecting the ring laser gyroscope calibration. Has anything changed in the hangar's electrical systems recently?" Thompson's eyes widened slightly. "We installed new LED lighting last month, but that shouldn't." "Actually, it could," Dr. Vasquez interrupted. "LED systems can generate electromagnetic signatures that interfere with sensitive navigation equipment. The solution would be recalibrating the gyroscope to compensate for the new interference pattern." Ashley nearly dropped her cleaning supplies. Dr. Vasquez had reached the same conclusion. But the damage was already done. 24 hours of grounded aircraft, wasted resources, and embarrassment in front of the Admiral, all because pride prevented them from considering the obvious. Admiral Peterson's expression had grown colder with each revelation. "So we have a multi-million-dollar fighter grounded because nobody thought to consider electromagnetic interference from new lighting?" "Ma'am, we followed all standard diagnostic procedures," Thompson said defensively. "Standard procedures that took 24 hours to fail," Peterson replied sharply. How many other minor anomalies are being overlooked in the squadron? Lieutenant Colonel Harrison stepped forward, attempting damage control. Admiral, I assure you this is an isolated incident. My maintenance crews are among the finest. Your finest crews just spent a day trying to solve a problem that should have been identified in the first hour. Peterson cut him off. Her attention turned to Dr. Vasquez. How long to implement? The recalibration? Assuming the equipment is available, perhaps 30 minutes, Dr. Vasquez replied. 30 minutes to solve a 24-hour problem, Peterson repeated, letting the words hang in the air. Colonel Harrison, I'm beginning to question whether this squadron is ready for Pacific deployment. The silence that followed was deafening. Ashley could see the career implications playing out across Harrison's face as he realized how badly this inspection was going. Captain Walsh stood rigidly at attention, her own future suddenly uncertain. Admiral, Harrison began carefully, if we could demonstrate our flight capabilities, with what aircraft? Peterson gestured toward Raptor 471. You've already told me this one is grounded. Are there other minor anomalies I should know about? Dr. Vasquez was already moving toward the maintenance station where the calibration equipment was stored. As she worked to implement the fix that should have been obvious from the beginning, Ashley found herself moving closer, ostensibly to clean the area, but really to observe the process. The electromagnetic interference is definitely the culprit, Dr. Vasquez explained to her team as she worked. The new LED fixtures are operating at a frequency that creates harmonic interference with the gyroscope's laser ring. Simple physics. Really? Ashley bit her tongue to keep from pointing out that the technical manual she'd read 3 months ago specifically warned about this exact issue. The manufacturer had even issued a bulletin about electromagnetic compatibility with newer lighting systems. But apparently, nobody in the maintenance crew had seen it. As Dr. Vasquez completed the recalibration, the error codes disappeared from the diagnostic screen. The fix had taken exactly 27 minutes less time than many of the pilots spent on their morning coffee routine. There, Dr. Vasquez announced. The aircraft is fully operational. Admiral Peterson nodded grimly. 27 minutes. To solve a 24-hour problem. I want a full report on how this was missed for so long. The inspection continued, but the damage was done. Peterson's team found additional issues maintenance logs that weren't properly updated, safety protocols that had been loosely interpreted, and a general attitude of complacency that the Admiral clearly found unacceptable. Ashley watched it all unfold while continuing her cleaning duties, invisible to the drama playing out around her. She observed how quickly confidence could crumble when competence was questioned, how rank provided no protection against genuine accountability. During the lunch break, as the inspection team reviewed their findings in private, Ashley overheard conversations that revealed the true scope of the problem. The 27th Fighter Squadron wasn't just failing in inspection, they were failing to meet the standards required for their upcoming deployment. The Pacific Theater is no place for this level of operational sloppiness, she heard Admiral Peterson tell her aide. If they can't identify basic maintenance issues, how can we trust them in combat? The afternoon brought more revelations as the inspection team dug deeper into squadron operations. Pilot training records revealed gaps in advanced systems knowledge. Maintenance procedures showed shortcuts that compromised safety. The pride and arrogance that had defined the squadron's culture were being systematically dismantled by objective evaluation. Ashley continued her work, moving through the hangar like a ghost while the foundations of the 27th Fighter Squadron's reputation crumbled around her. She knew things would only get worse before they got better, and she had a growing sense that the worst was yet to come. As the day shift ended and evening approached, Ashley reflected on the irony of her position. She was probably the most knowledgeable person in the hangar about the F-22's capabilities and limitations. Yet she remained invisible to those who needed that knowledge most. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, and she wondered how much more the squadron could endure before something truly catastrophic happened. The stage was set for a confrontation that would test everyone's assumptions about competence, authority, and the true meaning of being qualified to lead. The emergency klaxon shattered the pre-dawn silence at 0347 hours, its piercing wail echoing across Ramstein Air Base like the cry of a wounded animal. Ashley Bradford jolted awake in her small, off-base apartment, instantly alert despite having worked a double shift just 6 hours earlier. Through her bedroom window, she could see the base's emergency lighting system activating, bathing the distant hangars in an ominous red glow. Her phone buzzed with an automated message. All personnel report immediately. Priority 1 alert status. Ashley threw on her gray maintenance jumpsuit and drove through the empty Nevada desert roads, her headlights cutting through the darkness as military vehicles raced past her toward the base. The scene at Hangar 7 was controlled chaos. Emergency vehicles lined the tarmac, their red and blue lights creating a surreal disco effect against the pre-dawn sky. Ashley parked her beat-up Honda Civic between 2 Humvees and hurried toward the hangar, where she could see Lieutenant Colonel Harrison gesticulating wildly at a cluster of senior officers. Situation report. Admiral Peterson's voice cut through the noise as she strode into the hangar, still dressed in civilian clothes but radiating command authority. Her inspection from the previous day had ended with a scathing preliminary report, but now something far more serious was unfolding. Colonel James Mitchell, the base commander, stepped forward with a grim expression. "Admiral, we have a developing international incident. A Chinese surveillance aircraft violated South Korean airspace 2 hours ago. Seoul is requesting immediate air support, and we're the closest F-22 squadron available for rapid deployment." Ashley positioned herself near her cleaning station, invisible as always, but perfectly positioned to observe the crisis unfolding. She'd studied enough international relations to understand the implications. This wasn't just a routine intercept mission. Chinese military provocations in the region had been escalating for months, and any miscalculation could trigger a larger conflict. "What's our readiness status?" Peterson demanded. The question hung in the air like a toxic cloud. "Master Sergeant." Thompson stepped forward reluctantly. "Ma'am, after yesterday's inspection findings, we have significant operational concerns. 3 aircraft are down for extended maintenance. 2 pilots are on medical leave, and our tactical systems integration hasn't been fully validated since the electromagnetic interference issues were discovered." Admiral Peterson's expression darkened. "Are you telling me that this squadron, supposedly one of our premier air superiority units, cannot field a combat-ready flight?" Lieutenant Colonel Harrison attempted to salvage the situation. "Admiral, we can have aircraft airborne within the hour. My pilots are trained for exactly this type of mission." "Trained?" Dr. Vasquez emerged from behind a diagnostic station, her tablet displaying concerning data. "Colonel, the system integration tests I ran yesterday revealed serious gaps in pilot proficiency with advanced targeting systems. Half your flight leaders scored below acceptable thresholds on electronic warfare protocols." Ashley's hands clenched involuntarily as she listened. She'd observed those same pilots struggling with basic system operations during routine training flights. The gap between their confidence and their actual competence was staggering, but pointing that out would accomplish nothing. Captain Walsh stepped forward, her own reputation on the line. "Admiral, I can personally vouch for the capabilities of our senior pilots. We've completed hundreds of training hours on these systems. Training hours that apparently didn't address fundamental deficiencies," Peterson replied coldly. "Dr. Vasquez, what exactly did your assessments reveal?" Dr. Vasquez consulted her tablet grimly. Advanced threat recognition scores averaged 62% among flight leaders. Electronic countermeasures proficiency was even lower. Most critically, Multi-aircraft coordination using the F-22's networking capabilities showed systematic failures in communication protocols. The technical jargon might have been lost on some of the assembled officers, but Ashley understood every word. The F-22's greatest advantage wasn't just its stealth capability. It was the aircraft's ability to share sensor data and coordinate attacks through advanced networking systems. Without that capability, they were flying expensive single-seat fighters instead of integrated air superiority platforms. "Sir," Lieutenant Hartwell interrupted nervously, "maybe we could coordinate with the Navy squadrons based in Japan. Their response time would only be 4 hours longer than ours." Colonel Mitchell cut him off. "The South Koreans need immediate response capability. Every minute we delay gives the Chinese more time to escalate." Ashley watched the discussion deteriorate as military necessity crashed against operational reality. The 27th Fighter Squadron had built its reputation on swagger and tradition, but when crisis demanded actual competence, those attributes proved inadequate. Major Kim, the pilot who had questioned Harrison's tactics the previous day, spoke up cautiously. "Admiral, what if we deployed with reduced capability? A 2-aircraft element could provide symbolic support while we address the training deficiencies." "Symbolic support?" Peterson's voice carried the sharp edge of someone who had commanded actual combat operations. "Major, we're potentially facing advanced Chinese fighter aircraft equipped with state-of-the-art electronic warfare systems. Symbolic support will get our pilots killed and hand Beijing a propaganda victory." The harsh reality of the situation was becoming undeniable. As Ashley continued her cleaning duties, moving invisibly through the group of increasingly desperate officers, she heard fragments of increasingly frantic conversations. Radio chatter from the Pentagon demanding status updates. Diplomatic channels reporting Chinese military movements. South Korean officials requesting immediate confirmation of American support. Dr. Vasquez pulled Admiral Peterson aside for a private consultation, but their voices carried clearly to where Ashley worked. "Admiral, the fundamental problem isn't just pilot proficiency. The maintenance protocols have been compromised for months. These aircraft might be technically airworthy, but they're not combat-ready in any meaningful sense." "Explain." "The electromagnetic interference issues we discovered yesterday, they're symptomatic of broader systemic problems. Software updates haven't been properly integrated, sensor calibrations are outdated, and the electronic warfare systems haven't been tested against current generation threats." Ashley's cleaning cloth moved in methodical circles as she absorbed this information. Everything Dr. Vasquez described matched her own observations over the past year. She'd watched maintenance crews take shortcuts, seen pilots dismiss system warnings, observed training exercises that prioritized appearance over substance. Lieutenant Colonel Harrison was making increasingly desperate attempts to demonstrate his squadron's readiness. "Admiral, we can address these concerns during flight operations. My pilots learn best under real-world conditions." "Colonel," Peterson's voice was ice-cold, "you're suggesting we send inadequately trained pilots in improperly maintained aircraft to face potential combat with a near-peer adversary. That's not training, that's suicide with extra steps." The radio crackled with an update from Pacific Command. The Chinese aircraft had not only violated South Korean airspace, but had conducted what appeared to be reconnaissance flights over sensitive military installations. Beijing was claiming the flights were routine weather monitoring, but satellite imagery suggested otherwise. "We need birds in the air now," Colonel Mitchell announced grimly. "Political considerations aside, we have treaty obligations to our South Korean allies." Ashley watched as the assembled officers grappled with an impossible situation. Send inadequately prepared pilots into potential combat, or admit that one of America's premier fighter squadrons wasn't actually ready for the mission it existed to perform. Captain Ricci, the veteran pilot with 12 years of experience, finally voiced what everyone was thinking. Sir, maybe we should request support from other squadrons. The unit at Nellis could. The unit at Nellis is deployed to Eastern Europe. Admiral Peterson cut him off. The Pacific squadrons are committed to existing operations. We are the only F-22 unit available for immediate response. The weight of that statement settled over the hangar like a suffocating blanket. Ashley continued her work, invisible to the crisis unfolding around her, but increasingly aware that she was witnessing the collapse of institutional competence in real time. Dr. Vasquez approached the diagnostic station where Ashley was cleaning, still speaking into her secure phone. Yes, sir, I understand the political implications, but sending pilots with 60% proficiency scores against advanced threats is... Yes, sir, I'll prepare the technical assessment. As she ended the call, Dr. Vasquez noticed Ashley for the first time that morning. Excuse me, could you clean somewhere else for a moment? We need to run additional diagnostics. Of course, ma'am. Ashley replied quietly, moving her cart away while continuing to observe the unfolding disaster. The morning sun was beginning to rise over the Nevada desert, casting long shadows across the hangar floor. Admiral Peterson stood in the center of the space, surrounded by officers who were slowly realizing that their careers might be ending before breakfast. The 27th Fighter Squadron, proud, arrogant, and utterly unprepared, faced a test they were destined to fail. Ashley Bradford continued cleaning, invisible and ignored, while the foundation of everything these people believed about themselves cracked and began to crumble. The crisis deepened as morning progressed into a nightmare of cascading failures. Ashley watched from her position near the maintenance bay as Lieutenant Hartwell attempted to demonstrate basic weapon systems proficiency on the F-22 simulation trainer. His third attempt at target acquisition had just failed spectacularly. The young pilot's face flushed with embarrassment as error messages flashed across multiple screens. Sir, the targeting computer isn't responding to manual inputs, Hartwell reported to Captain Walsh, who stood behind him with barely concealed frustration. The targeting computer is fine, Lieutenant, Walsh snapped. Your sequence is wrong. You're trying to activate the AN-APG-77 radar in stealth mode while simultaneously broadcasting IFF signals. That's fundamentally contradictory. Ashley paused in her cleaning routine, fighting the urge to explain that Hartwell's confusion stemmed from outdated training materials. The latest software update had changed the interface protocols, but apparently, nobody had updated the training curriculum to match. She'd read the technical bulletins 3 weeks ago, when they'd arrived in the base library bulletins that were apparently gathering dust in someone's inbox. Dr. Vasquez approached the simulation station with Admiral Peterson close behind. Let me see the diagnostic data, she said, pushing Hartwell aside. Her fingers flew across the interface as she pulled up system logs. When was this trainer last synchronized with current aircraft software? Master Sergeant Thompson checked his maintenance logs. Should have been updated 2 months ago, ma'am. Should have been. Peterson's voice carried the deadly calm of someone who had moved beyond anger into professional disappointment. Sergeant, either it was updated or it wasn't. Which is it? Thompson's face went pale as he realized the implications. Ma'am, the update was scheduled, but we had compatibility issues with the base network. IT said they'd resolve it, but with the budget constraints. You've been training pilots on obsolete software for 2 months? Dr. Vasquez's voice rose in disbelief. No wonder their proficiency scores are abysmal. They're learning procedures that don't match the aircraft they're supposed to fly. Ashley continued cleaning nearby, her movements automatic while her mind processed the unfolding disaster. She'd noticed the discrepancies months ago, but had assumed someone in authority was aware of them. The idea that an entire squadron had been training on outdated systems while the relevant updates sat uninstalled was almost beyond comprehension. The radio crackled with another update from Pacific Command. The Chinese aircraft had been joined by 2 additional surveillance planes, and they were now conducting coordinated reconnaissance flights along the Korean demilitarized zone. Beijing was claiming the flights were defensive responses to American military buildup, but satellite imagery showed preparations for potential air-to-air engagement. "We need to make a decision," Colonel Mitchell announced grimly. "Washington wants F-22s airborne within the next 2 hours, ready or not." Admiral Peterson stared at the simulation trainer where Hartwell was making his 4th failed attempt at basic target acquisition. "Colonel, I cannot in good conscience authorize combat deployment of pilots who can't operate their own weapon systems." "Then what do you suggest?" Mitchell's frustration was evident. "We tell the President that America's most advanced fighter squadron is operationally useless, that we've been spending billions of dollars on aircraft that our pilots can't actually fly." The question hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Ashley observed the faces around her officers who had built careers on the assumption that expensive technology and impressive titles translated automatically into combat effectiveness. That assumption was now being tested against harsh reality, and it was failing catastrophic. Captain Ritchie attempted to salvage something from the situation. "Admiral, what if we deployed with simplified mission parameters? Basic air-to-air. Intercept, no advanced networking, minimal electronic warfare employment?" "Captain," Dr. Vasquez interjected, "the Chinese aircraft are equipped with advanced electronic warfare suites specifically designed to counter F-22 capabilities. Simplified mission parameters mean sending our pilots into combat with both hands tied behind their backs." Ashley knew Dr. Vasquez was right. The J-20 fighters that China had been deploying in the region carried electronic warfare systems that could detect and track stealth aircraft using techniques that had evolved significantly since the F-22 was designed. Countering those threats required sophisticated employment of the very networking and electronic warfare capabilities that this squadron had apparently never mastered. Lieutenant Colonel Harrison made one last desperate attempt to maintain his squadron's viability. "Admiral, my pilots are combat veterans. They've flown missions over Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan. Real-world experience counts for something." "Colonel," Peterson's voice was ice cold, "your pilots flew air superiority missions against enemies with minimal electronic warfare capabilities and outdated aircraft. The Chinese J-20 isn't a 40-year-old Meg. It's a modern stealth fighter with capabilities that specifically target F-22 vulnerabilities." The harsh reality was becoming undeniable. Ashley continued her work while listening to fragments of increasingly desperate conversations. She heard Major Kim quietly telling another pilot that she'd never successfully completed advanced networking protocols during training. Captain Walsh was explaining to Dr. Vasquez that budget constraints had forced them to defer critical system updates for months. Lieutenant Hartwell was admitting that he'd never actually engaged targets using the F-22's most advanced sensors. The radio brought another update that made the situation even more critical. South Korean military commanders were reporting that the Chinese aircraft were now conducting what appeared to be practice intercept runs against Allied reconnaissance flights. The provocation was escalating toward potential conflict, and political pressure for American response was mounting by the hour. "I'm getting calls directly from the Secretary of Defense," Colonel Mitchell announced after ending a secure phone conversation. "The South Koreans are threatening to scramble their own fighters if we don't provide immediate support. That could trigger exactly the kind of escalation we're trying to prevent." Ashley watched Admiral Peterson weigh impossible options. Send inadequately trained pilots into potential combat against advanced adversaries, or admit that American air power projection was built on a foundation of institutional incompetence. Either choice carried consequences that could reshape military careers and international relationships. Dr. Vasquez approached Peterson with her tablet displaying comprehensive assessment data. "Admiral, I've completed the technical evaluation. Bottom line, this squadron requires minimum 6 weeks of intensive retraining before they could safely engage modern air threats. The software updates alone would take 2 weeks to implement and validate. 6 weeks? Mitchell's voice cracked. Slightly. We need aircraft airborne in 6 hours. The impossible mathematics of the situation were becoming clear. Military necessity demanded immediate action, but operational reality made that action potentially catastrophic. Ashley observed the officers grappling with a problem that had no good solutions, only degrees of disaster. Lieutenant Hartwell's fifth attempt at target acquisition failed even more spectacularly than his previous efforts. The simulation trainer actually shutting down completely when he attempted an impossible combination of stealth and active radar modes. The young pilot stared at the blank screens in defeat, his confidence completely shattered. "That's enough," Admiral Peterson announced grimly. "Dr. Vasquez, prepare a full technical assessment for Pentagon review. Colonel Mitchell, I need secure communications with Pacific Command immediately." As Peterson moved toward the communications center, Ashley caught fragments of her conversation with an aide. "Yes, sir, I understand the political implications, but deploying pilots with this level of proficiency against advanced threats isn't military action. It's suicide with a flag draped over it." The morning sun climbed higher over the Nevada desert, casting harsh light on a situation that was rapidly spiraling beyond anyone's control. The 27th Fighter Squadron, America's supposed elite air superiority unit, faced the humiliating reality that they were fundamentally unprepared for the mission they existed to perform. Ashley Bradford continued cleaning, invisible to the crisis, but increasingly aware that she was witnessing the complete collapse of institutional competence. Somewhere in the distance, she could hear the sound of aircraft engines starting up other squadrons, preparing for missions they were actually qualified to fly, while the most expensive fighters in the world sat grounded due to pilot and maintenance inadequacies. The stage was set for a confrontation that would test everything these officers believed about leadership, competence, and the true cost of institutional arrogance. The moment that would change everything began with a simple accident. Ashley was emptying a waste bin near the communications center when Staff Sergeant Chen knocked over his coffee cup, sending hot liquid cascading across a stack of classified technical manuals. As brown stains spread across the documents, Chen cursed under his breath and began frantically blotting the papers with whatever he could find. "Damn it," he muttered. "These are the only copies of the updated electronic warfare protocols. Colonel Harrison will have my head if these are ruined." Ashley instinctively moved to help, grabbing clean rags from her cart. As she carefully separated the dampened pages, her eyes involuntarily scanned the technical specifications spread before her. Her breath caught as she recognized the content. These were the exact protocols she'd been studying in the base library. The classified supplements to the unclassified manuals she'd memorized months ago. "I think most of them are salvageable," she said quietly, carefully arranging the documents to dry without further damage. Chun looked up at her with genuine gratitude. "Thanks. These manuals contain the countermeasures for the new Chinese electronic warfare systems. Without them, our pilots are flying blind against J-20 capabilities." Ashley nodded, fighting the urge to point out that the countermeasures were only effective if pilots understood the underlying principles behind electronic warfare theory. The manuals described procedures, but they didn't explain why those procedures worked or how to adapt them when circumstances changed. As she continued cleaning, Ashley overheard Dr. Vasquez speaking urgently into her secure phone near the communications station. "Sir, I understand the political pressure, but these pilots need fundamental retraining. We're not talking about refresher courses. We're talking about learning basic system integration from scratch." The conversation was interrupted by Master Sergeant Thompson, who approached with a tablet displaying maintenance diagnostics. "Dr. Vasquez, we've got another problem." Raptor 463 is showing intermittent failures in the electronic warfare suite. The system keeps defaulting to passive mode when it should maintain active countermeasures. Dr. Vasquez examined the diagnostic data with growing frustration. This is the same electromagnetic interference pattern we saw yesterday. The LED lighting is affecting multiple aircraft systems, not just navigation. Ashley paused in her cleaning, recognizing the error pattern immediately. She'd seen identical symptoms described in a technical bulletin that had been issued 6 months ago. The solution involved recalibrating the entire electronic warfare suite to compensate for electromagnetic interference across multiple frequency bands, a complex procedure that required understanding both the interference source and the aircraft's defensive systems. Thompson shook his head. "Ma'am, we don't have personnel qualified to perform that level of system recalibration. The manufacturer's technical representatives aren't available for emergency calls, and our training doesn't cover electromagnetic compatibility issues." "How long would it take to get qualified technicians here?" Dr. Vasquez asked. "Minimum 72 hours, assuming they're available. More likely a week." Dr. Vasquez closed her eyes briefly, calculating impossible timelines. "We need these aircraft operational in hours, not days." Ashley continued working nearby, her cleaning routine providing perfect cover as she absorbed every detail of the technical discussion. She knew exactly how to perform the recalibration, had studied the procedures extensively after reading about similar issues affecting other F-22 squadrons. But her knowledge remained irrelevant because of her position and rank. The crisis deepened. When Lieutenant Colonel Harrison emerged from his meeting with Admiral Peterson, his face pale and his usual confidence completely shattered. He gathered his senior staff in the center of the hangar, where Ashley could hear every word while appearing to focus on her cleaning duties. "People, we have a decision point," Harrison began, his voice lacking its usual commanding tone. "Washington is demanding immediate deployment. Admiral Peterson has recommended against it due to training deficiencies. Colonel Mitchell is caught between operational necessity and safety concerns." Captain Walsh stepped forward. "Sir, what are our actual orders?" "We're to prepare for immediate deployment while higher authorities decide whether to authorize it." Harrison replied grimly. "That means we have approximately 90 minutes to demonstrate combat readiness, or this squadron faces permanent operational suspension." The weight of that statement hit the assembled personnel like a physical blow. Permanent suspension meant career-ending transfers, dissolution of the unit, and public acknowledgement that America's premier stealth fighter squadron was fundamentally incompetent. Major Kim spoke up carefully. "Sir, given the electronic warfare system failures and training deficiencies, what exactly are we supposed to demonstrate?" Harrison's jaw tightened. "We demonstrate whatever capabilities we actually have, Major. If that's not enough, then we face the consequences." Ashley watched the faces around her as the reality sank in. These officers had built their careers on the assumption that expensive technology and impressive titles would carry them through any challenge. Now they were discovering that actual competence couldn't be faked when lives were on the line. Dr. Vasquez approached the group with her tablet displaying comprehensive system diagnostics. "Colonel, I've completed the full technical assessment. We have 4 aircraft with varying degrees of electronic warfare capability. 2 are completely non-functional due to electromagnetic interference. The other 2 can perform basic defensive operations, but lack the integration necessary for coordinated missions." "What about pilot proficiency?" Admiral Peterson asked as she rejoined the group. 40% of flight leaders can perform basic intercept missions using simplified protocols, Dr. Vasquez replied. None have demonstrated competency with advanced networking or electronic warfare employment against modern threats. The silence that followed was deafening. Ashley continued her work while the officers grappled with numbers that made deployment essentially suicidal. Even she could see that sending partially trained pilots in partially functional aircraft against advanced adversaries was a recipe for catastrophe. Captain Ricci attempted to find some viable option. "Admiral, what if we coordinated with Navy assets? Their Super Hornets might not have stealth capability, but their pilots are current on electronic warfare procedures." "The nearest Navy squadron is 6 hours away," Peterson replied. "Besides, coordination between services requires communication protocols that this squadron apparently hasn't mastered either." Ashley felt a growing sense of inevitability as she listened to the discussion. Every potential solution revealed additional layers of incompetence. The 27th Fighter Squadron wasn't just unprepared for this specific mission. They were fundamentally unprepared for modern air combat. The radio crackled with another update that made the situation even more critical. Chinese aircraft were now conducting mock attack runs against South Korean military installations. Seoul was threatening to engage with their own fighters, which could trigger the exact escalation that American intervention was supposed to prevent. "Time's up," Colonel Mitchell announced as he entered the hangar. "Washington wants a go-no-go decision in 30 minutes. Either we deploy, or we admit publicly that our most expensive military program is operationally useless." Admiral Peterson looked around the hangar at the assembled personnel, her expression grim. "Colonel, in my professional opinion, deploying this squadron under current conditions would constitute criminal negligence. These pilots would be shot down within hours of engaging Chinese fighters." "Then what do you recommend?" Mitchell asked. "I recommend we tell the truth," Peterson replied firmly. "This squadron requires fundamental restructuring before it can safely engage modern air threats." The political implications of that recommendation were staggering. Ashley could see the calculations playing out across every face in the hangar. Careers would end, budgets would be questioned, and America's air superiority doctrine would face public scrutiny that could reshape military policy for decades. As the 30-minute deadline approached, Ashley watched the final collapse of institutional arrogance. Officers who had spent years believing their own propaganda now faced the harsh reality that competence couldn't be improvised when lives were at stake. The stage was set for a moment that would force everyone to confront uncomfortable truths about leadership, expertise, and the difference between appearing capable and actually being capable. In the growing tension of those final minutes, Ashley Bradford continued cleaning, invisible but increasingly aware that she was about to witness something that would change everything. The decision came down to mathematics that no one wanted to acknowledge. Admiral Peterson stood before a wall-mounted display showing real-time satellite imagery of Chinese aircraft formations, her finger tracing their flight patterns with the precision of someone who understood exactly what those movements meant. 18 J-20 fighters conducting coordinated reconnaissance, she announced to the assembled officers. Electronic warfare aircraft providing cover. Surface-to-air missile batteries repositioned to support air operations. This isn't a routine patrol, it's a rehearsal for actual conflict. Ashley maintained her position near the communications equipment, methodically cleaning while absorbing every detail of the tactical assessment. She recognized the formation patterns from classified briefings she'd read during her obsessive study of modern air combat doctrine. The Chinese weren't just probing defenses. They were testing response times and gathering intelligence on American capabilities. Colonel Mitchell's secure phone buzzed with another call from Washington. After a terse conversation filled with military acronyms and political euphemisms, he turned to address the group with barely controlled desperation. "The President has been briefed on our situation," Mitchell announced grimly. "The political cost of admitting our premier fighter squadron is non-operational exceeds the military risk of deployment. We've been ordered to launch within 45 minutes." The silence that followed was profound. Ashley watched as the implications sank in. They were being ordered to send inadequately trained pilots and partially functional aircraft into potential combat against superior forces. The decision was political theater designed to maintain the illusion of American air power, regardless of the human cost. Dr. Vasquez stepped forward with her tablet displaying final system diagnostics. Colonel, I cannot professionally endorse this deployment. These aircraft will be detected, tracked, and engaged by Chinese electronic warfare systems that specifically target F-22 vulnerabilities. Our pilots lack the training to counter those threats. Dr. Vasquez, Mitchell replied. With obvious frustration, your professional assessment has been noted and forwarded to appropriate authorities. However, this decision has moved beyond technical considerations. Ashley felt a chill as she recognized the familiar pattern of institutional thinking. When competence conflicted with image always won. She'd seen it in smaller ways throughout her time at the base, but never with such potentially catastrophic consequences. Lieutenant Colonel Harrison attempted to rally his demoralized squadron. People, we've trained for this mission. Yes, there are technical challenges, but we're professional military aviators. We adapt and overcome. Captain Walsh nodded with forced confidence. Sir, we'll make do with available capabilities. Basic intercept missions, minimal electronic warfare employment, strict adherence to engagement protocols. Ashley bit her tongue to keep from pointing out that basic intercept missions against J-20 fighters was like bringing a musket to a gunfight. The Chinese aircraft carried electronic warfare suites specifically designed to defeat stealth technology through passive detection methods that the F-22's defensive systems weren't configured to counter. Major Kim raised a tentative hand. Sir, what about pilot rotation? If we're deploying with reduced capabilities, shouldn't we prioritize our most experienced flight leaders? The question revealed another layer of the crisis. Harrison's face tightened as he realized that his most experienced pilots were the ones who had failed most spectacularly during the morning's assessments. Experience meant nothing when it was based on outdated training and obsolete procedures. Master. Sergeant Thompson approached with a clipboard full of maintenance discrepancies. Sir, I need to report additional concerns. The electromagnetic interference issues are affecting more systems than initially assessed. Communication equipment, navigation aids, even basic flight instruments are showing intermittent failures. Dr. Vasquez examined Thompson's data with growing alarm. This interference pattern is cumulative. The longer these aircraft operate in this environment, the more systems will be affected. We're looking at potential cascading failures during flight operations. Ashley knew exactly what Dr. Vasquez meant. The LED lighting interference wasn't just affecting individual systems. It was creating harmonic resonance that could destabilize the aircraft's entire electronic architecture. She'd read about similar incidents affecting other air bases, with solutions that required systematic recalibration of every electronic system on the aircraft. Admiral Peterson made one final attempt to inject sanity into the proceedings. Colonel Mitchell, I formally request that this deployment be delayed pending resolution of critical safety issues. The electromagnetic interference alone makes these aircraft unsafe for combat operations. Mitchell's expression showed the strain of someone caught between impossible alternatives. Admiral, I share your concerns, but the decision has been made at the highest levels. We launch in 37 minutes. The countdown had become inexorable. Ashley watched as personnel began. The pre-flight preparations that everyone knew were fundamentally flawed. Pilots who couldn't operate their weapons systems were strapping into aircraft with compromised electronic systems to face adversaries specifically equipped to exploit those exact vulnerabilities. Captain Ritchie approached Lieutenant Hartwell, who was staring at his flight gear with obvious dread. Listen, kid, stick close to my wing and follow my lead. Don't try anything fancy, just basic flying and communication. Hartwell nodded weakly, but Ashley could see the terror in his eyes. The young pilot understood exactly what he was being asked to do, and the knowledge was paralyzing him. His repeated failures on the simulation trainer had shattered whatever confidence he'd possessed, leaving him psychologically unprepared for the mission ahead. Dr. Vasquez made a final attempt to document the unfolding disaster. "Admiral, I'm submitting a formal technical assessment stating that this deployment violates basic airworthiness standards. If these aircraft are lost, the responsibility lies with those who ordered unsafe operations." "Noted," Admiral Peterson replied grimly. "Your assessment will be part of the official record." Ashley realized she was witnessing the creation of historical documentation, records that would eventually explain how institutional arrogance had led to preventable tragedy. The technical assessments, safety warnings, and professional objections were all being carefully recorded to protect careers when the inevitable congressional investigations began. The radio brought another update that made the situation even more urgent. Chinese aircraft were now conducting formation flights directly along the Korean border, with surface-to-air missile systems actively tracking Allied aircraft in the region. Seoul was reporting that their own fighters were warming up on runways, preparing to respond to increasingly provocative maneuvers. "Time to make the call," Colonel Mitchell announced, reaching for the secure phone that would authorize takeoff. His hand hesitated over the device as he realized that his next words would likely send inadequately prepared pilots to their deaths. Ashley continued cleaning, invisible to the drama, but increasingly aware that she was witnessing the final moments before institutional failure became personal tragedy. Somewhere in the back of her mind, she began calculating the technical solutions that could address the electromagnetic interference, the training deficiencies, and the tactical vulnerabilities that everyone else seemed unable to resolve. The moment of truth had arrived. In the growing tension of those final minutes, Ashley Bradford found herself standing at the intersection of duty and conscience, competence and authority, knowing that her voice could change everything if anyone was willing to listen to the invisible woman with the mop. But first, they would have to notice that she existed at all. The countdown continued, each second bringing them closer to a decision that would test every assumption about leadership, expertise, and the true cost of maintaining illusions when lives hung in the balance. Ashley stood perfectly still, cleaning supplies in hand, while the weight of knowledge pressed against her silence, like a dam about to burst. The moment everything changed began with a dropped wrench. Staff Sergeant Murphy was conducting final pre-flight checks on Raptor 458 when his tool slipped from his grip, clattering across the hangar floor and coming to rest directly at Ashley's feet. As she bent to retrieve it, the electromagnetic interference pattern on his diagnostic screen caught her attention. The same cascading failure signature she'd been mentally analyzing for the past hour. "Thank you," Murphy said absently as Ashley handed him the wrench, his focus entirely on the bewildering array of error codes displaying across multiple screens. Ashley hesitated for a moment, then spoke quietly. "Sergeant, have you tried recalibrating the ring laser gyroscope array to compensate for harmonic interference at 2.4 GHz? Murphy looked up from his diagnostic equipment, startled to hear technical terminology from someone in a maintenance jumpsuit. "What did you say?" "The LED lighting system," Ashley continued, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "It's operating at a frequency that creates harmonic interference with the aircraft's inertial navigation system. The error pattern you're seeing indicates that the electromagnetic pulse is affecting the ring laser gyroscope's optical pathways." Murphy stared at her for a long moment, then glanced back at his diagnostic screen. "How do you know about ring laser gyroscopes?" "I read the technical manuals," Ashley replied simply. "The solution is in Technical Bulletin 22F1138, issued 6 months ago. Recalibrate the gyroscope array to filter harmonic interference, then adjust the electronic warfare suite to compensate for the modified baseline." The conversation had caught the attention of Dr. Vasquez, who approached with her tablet already open. "Excuse me, what exactly are you suggesting?" Ashley felt every eye in the immediate area focusing on her as she stepped outside her invisible comfort zone. "Ma'am, the electromagnetic interference affecting these aircraft isn't random. It's a specific harmonic resonance created by the LED lighting frequency interacting with the F-22's electronic systems. The solution requires systematic recalibration of multiple systems to establish a new baseline that accounts for the interference pattern." Dr. Vasquez studied Ashley's face with growing interest. "You've read Technical Bulletin 22F1138? "Yes, ma'am." Along with the follow-up bulletins 22F1139 through 22F1143, which address electromagnetic compatibility issues across different aircraft systems. The silence that followed was profound. Dr. Vasquez pulled up the technical bulletins on her tablet, scanning through pages of complex technical specifications. These bulletins are classified at the secret level. How does maintenance personnel have access to classified technical documentation? Ashley's heart pounded as she realized the implications of what she'd just revealed. "Ma'am, The bulletins were in the base library technical section. I assumed they were available for study." Lieutenant Colonel Harrison, who had been observing from a distance, approached with obvious confusion. "What's going on here?" Dr. Vasquez looked up from her tablet with an expression of amazement. "Colonel, this maintenance worker has just accurately diagnosed the electromagnetic interference problem and provided a technically sound solution, based on classified documentation that apparently nobody else has read." Harrison stared at Ashley, as if seeing her for the first time. "You're telling me that someone whose job is emptying trash cans knows more about F-22 electronic systems than my maintenance crews?" "More than that," Dr. Vasquez replied, her fingers flying across her tablet, as she cross-referenced Ashley's suggestions with official technical specifications. Her proposed solution matches exactly with the manufacturer's recommended procedures for electromagnetic interference mitigation. This is graduate-level systems engineering knowledge. Ashley felt the weight of sudden attention as more personnel gathered around the diagnostic station. She'd spent 3 years being invisible, and now found herself thrust into a spotlight that felt overwhelmingly bright. Master Sergeant Thompson pushed through the growing crowd, his weathered face showing confusion and suspicion. "Hold on. Bradford, how do you know about electromagnetic interference patterns? That's not covered in basic maintenance training." "I study the technical manuals during my off-duty time," Ashley replied quietly. "I wanted to understand the aircraft better. Study them?" Captain Walsh had joined the group, her expression skeptical. "These are some of the most complex weapon systems ever built. You can't just study your way to expertise." Dr. Vasquez held up her tablet, displaying the technical bulletins Ashley had referenced. "Actually, Captain, her knowledge appears to be remarkably comprehensive. She's not just reciting memorized procedures, she understands the underlying engineering principles." Admiral Peterson approached, drawn by the commotion. "What exactly is happening here?" "Admiral," Dr. Vasquez began, "we may have found someone who can actually solve our electromagnetic interference problems. This maintenance worker has demonstrated technical knowledge that surpasses most of our qualified personnel." Peterson studied Ashley with the sharp eyes of someone who had learned to recognize competence regardless of its packaging. "What's your name?" "Ashley Bradford, ma'am." "Ms. Bradford, Dr. Vasquez tells me you understand electromagnetic interference mitigation procedures. Can you be more specific about the solution you're proposing?" Ashley took a deep breath, knowing that her next words would either establish her credibility or confirm that she was overstepping her bounds. "Admiral, the LED lighting is creating electromagnetic pulses at 2.4 gigahertz, which corresponds to the resonant frequency of the F-22's ring laser gyroscope assembly. This creates harmonic interference that cascades through connected systems. She pointed toward the diagnostic display. The solution requires recalibrating the inertial navigation system to filter the interference, then adjusting the electronic warfare suite to compensate for the modified baseline. The process takes approximately 45 minutes per aircraft if performed systematically. Dr. Vasquez was frantically checking Ashley's technical assessment against official documentation. "Admiral, she's absolutely correct. Every detail matches the manufacturer's specifications for electromagnetic compatibility issues." The group was growing larger as word spread through the hangar that someone had identified solutions to problems that had stumped qualified technicians for days. Ashley felt increasingly uncomfortable with the attention, but pressed forward, knowing that lives might depend on the information she possessed. "There's more," Ashley continued. "The electronic warfare system failures aren't just caused by electromagnetic interference. The software updates that were deferred due to network compatibility issues. Those updates contain critical countermeasures for the J-20's passive detection systems." Lieutenant Colonel Harrison stepped closer, his expression a mixture of confusion and growing respect. "How do you know about J-20 capabilities?" "I read the intelligence briefings that are filed in the base library," Ashley replied. "The J-20 uses quantum radar and infrared search and track systems that can detect stealth aircraft through methods that the F-22's current electronic warfare suite isn't configured to counter." Dr. Vasquez looked up from her tablet with something approaching awe. "She's describing classified intelligence assessments with complete accuracy. Ms. Bradford, have you studied the F-22's countermeasures for quantum radar detection?" "Yes, ma'am. The countermeasures exist, but they require software integration that this squadron hasn't implemented. The procedures are outlined in classified supplements to the pilot training manuals." Admiral Peterson's expression had shifted from skepticism to intense interest. "Ms. Bradford, you're describing technical and tactical knowledge that most of my pilots don't possess. How long have you been studying these systems?" 3 years, ma'am. Since I started working here." The implications of that statement hung in the air like a revelation. For 3 years, while qualified personnel struggled with basic maintenance and training issues, the most knowledgeable person on base had been emptying trash cans and mopping floors, invisible to everyone who needed her expertise. Colonel Mitchell, who had been listening from the edge of the group, stepped forward with obvious amazement. "Are you telling me that we've had someone with this level of technical knowledge working as maintenance staff?" "Not just technical knowledge," Dr. Vasquez interjected. "She understands systems integration, electromagnetic theory, and tactical employment principles. This is the kind of comprehensive expertise that takes years to develop." Ashley felt the weight of realization settling over the assembled personnel as they grappled with the uncomfortable truth that competence and authority didn't always align. The invisible woman they'd ignored for 3 years possessed exactly the knowledge they needed to solve their most critical problems. The question that remained was whether institutional pride would allow them to accept help from someone whose expertise challenged everything they believed about qualifications, hierarchy, and the nature of true competence. The transformation began with a single question that changed everything. Admiral Peterson looked directly at Ashley Bradford and asked the words that would reshape not just the crisis, but everyone's understanding of what competence actually meant. "Ms. Bradford," Peterson said with the gravity of someone making a career-defining decision, "can you fix these aircraft and train these pilots to survive combat against J-20 fighters?" The hangar fell completely silent. Ashley felt the weight of dozens of eyes focused on her, officers and enlisted personnel, alike waiting for her response to a question that seemed impossible. The invisible maintenance worker was being asked to save a mission that the most expensive military program in history couldn't execute. "Admiral," Ashley replied with quiet confidence, "I can implement the electromagnetic interference solutions in approximately 4 hours." The pilot training for advanced countermeasures would require intensive briefings on J-2O, capabilities, and quantum radar detection methods. It's challenging, but achievable. Dr. Vasquez stepped forward with her tablet, displaying mission timelines. Admiral, the political deadline is still in effect. We have less than 3 hours before deployment authorization expires. Peterson's expression hardened with decision. Then we compressed the timeline. Ms. Bradford, I'm authorizing you to take immediate charge of aircraft systems recalibration and pilot tactical briefings. The implications of that statement rippled through the assembled personnel like a shockwave. Lieutenant Colonel Harrison's face went pale as he realized that his authority was being bypassed in favor of someone who had been invisible just minutes earlier. Admiral, Harrison protested, with all due respect. Ms. Bradford isn't qualified to colonel. Peterson cut him off with icy precision. Your qualified personnel have spent days failing to solve problems that Ms. Bradford diagnosed in minutes, right now. Qualification is measured by results, not rank. Ashley felt the enormous responsibility settling on her shoulders as she stepped into a role she'd never imagined holding. I'll need access to all aircraft diagnostic systems and authorization to modify software configurations. Master Sergeant. Thompson, still struggling to process the sudden reversal of hierarchy, stepped forward hesitantly. Ma'am, what exactly do you need from maintenance personnel? Sergeant, I need teams assigned to each aircraft for simultaneous recalibration. Ashley replied, her voice gaining strength as she embraced her new role. The electromagnetic interference affects multiple systems, so we need coordinated procedures. Across inertial navigation, electronic warfare, and communication arrays. Dr. Vasquez was already pulling up technical specifications on her tablet. Ms. Bradford, walk me through the recalibration sequence. I want to verify procedures before we begin. Ashley moved to the diagnostic station and began explaining the technical process with a fluency that amazed everyone listening. First, we establish baseline measurements for each affected system. The LED lighting creates electromagnetic pulses at specific frequencies, so we need to map the interference pattern across the entire aircraft. As she spoke, Ashley pulled up system schematics that most of the pilots had never seen in such detail. Her fingers moved confidently across the interface, navigating through complex menus with the ease of someone who had studied every manual and memorized every procedure. The ring laser gyroscope recalibration requires adjusting the optical path. Compensation to filter harmonic interference, Ashley continued. Then we modify the electronic warfare suite to integrate the new baseline measurements. Finally, we update the communication arrays to maintain networking capability despite the electromagnetic interference. Lieutenant Hartwell, who had been watching in amazement, raised his hand tentatively. Ma'am, what about the pilot briefings? What do we need to know about J-20 capabilities? Ashley turned to address the assembled pilots, her demeanor shifting from technical expert to tactical. Instructor, the J-20 uses quantum radar that can detect stealth aircraft through quantum entanglement principles. Traditional electronic warfare assumes radio frequency detection methods, but quantum radar operates on completely different physics. Captain Walsh stepped closer, her skepticism gradually being replaced by genuine interest. How do we counter quantum radar detection? The F-22 has countermeasures built into the latest software updates, Ashley explained. The aircraft can employ quantum interference techniques that disrupt the entanglement process. However, these countermeasures require specific flight profiles and timing that aren't covered in standard training. Admiral Peterson nodded approvingly. Ms. Bradford, I want you to brief each pilot individually on these countermeasures. We can't afford any misunderstandings when lives are at stake. Ashley began the intensive training process that would transform inadequately prepared pilots into a combat-ready squadron. Working with each pilot individually, she explained the technical principles behind quantum radar and demonstrated the countermeasures that could defeat it. "Lieutenant Hartwell," Ashley said as she worked with the young pilot at a training station, "the key is understanding that quantum radar detection isn't instantaneous. You have approximately 12 seconds from initial quantum entanglement to implement countermeasures." Hartwell's eyes widened as Ashley explained concepts that had never been covered in his formal training. "How do I know when quantum entanglement begins?" "The aircraft's quantum detection system will alert you," Ashley replied, pointing to a display that Hartwell had never learned to interpret. "This indicator shows quantum field fluctuations. When it spikes, you have 12 seconds to execute the disruption sequence." As Ashley moved from pilot to pilot, word of her expertise spread throughout the base. Senior officers who had dismissed her for years now found themselves seeking her technical advice. The invisible maintenance worker had become the most valuable person in the squadron. Dr. Vasquez approached Ashley with updated mission parameters. "Ms. Bradford, the Chinese formation has increased to 24 aircraft. Intelligence suggests they're specifically testing our quantum radar countermeasures. Your training may be the only thing that keeps our pilots alive." Ashley nodded grimly, understanding the enormous stakes. "Dr. Vasquez, I recommend modifying our formation tactics to account for quantum radar capabilities. Traditional stealth formations assume radio frequency detection. Against quantum radar, we need dispersed patterns that minimize quantum entanglement opportunities." The tactical briefing that followed revolutionized everything the pilots thought they knew about modern air combat. Ashley explained how quantum physics had changed the fundamental rules of engagement, requiring new strategies that most military planners hadn't even considered. "The Chinese are specifically hunting for F-22s using quantum radar," Ashley told the assembled pilots. "They know our traditional tactics because those tactics were developed for radio frequency threats. Today, we're going to employ quantum countermeasures that they won't expect." Major Kim raised her hand. "Ms. Bradford, how confident are you in these countermeasures?" Ashley's expression was serious but determined. "Major, the physics are sound and the aircraft systems are designed for these procedures. The challenge isn't technical, it's ensuring that every pilot executes the countermeasures precisely when needed." As the final minutes of preparation ticked away, Ashley stood in the center of the hangar surrounded by aircraft that were now fully operational and pilots who finally understood their capabilities. The transformation from invisible maintenance worker to emergency flight leader had taken less than 4 hours, but it had changed everything. Admiral Peterson approached Ashley with obvious respect. "Ms. Bradford, you've accomplished something remarkable here. These pilots are now better trained than they've ever been, and these aircraft are performing at specifications we didn't know they possessed." Ashley looked around the hangar at the faces that now regarded her with respect rather than dismissal. "Admiral, competence isn't about rank or position. It's about understanding the job and doing it properly." The radio crackled with final authorization from Washington. The mission was approved, the pilots were ready, and the aircraft were fully operational. As the F-22s began their startup procedures, Ashley realized that her journey from invisible to indispensable had revealed a fundamental truth about leadership and expertise that would resonate far beyond this single crisis. The woman who had been cleaning hangars just hours earlier now watched as pilots she had trained prepared to face combat using techniques she had taught them. Ashley Bradford had proven that true competence could emerge from the most unexpected places, challenging every assumption about authority, qualification, and the nature of genuine expertise. As the first F-22 rolled toward the runway, Ashley stood tall, no longer invisible, finally recognized for what she had always been, the most qualified person in the room. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.